Welcome to NYNJPA Weather, your weather source for the Northern Mid-Atlantic. I'm your meteorologist, Stephen DiMartino, and this is the weekend edition. This morning, as of 8 a.m., there are plenty of scattered snow showers developing throughout the Northern Mid-Atlantic, especially over eastern Pennsylvania. These snow showers are the result of another disturbance that is approaching from the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley that will move through the Northern Mid-Atlantic, and we're going to see this throughout the entire weekend. Now, these scattered snow showers are generally light, producing anywhere from just a dusting to at most an inch of snow. And most of these snow showers are just plain flurries, really with no significant impact on the roadways. Of course, with the roadways already being snowpacked in several locations and icy, it is important to take your time this weekend when driving. There is no rush. Give yourself a little bit of extra time and keep an eye out because there's all these snow piles all over the place that are reducing visibility as far as when you make a turn or backing out. So just use some caution. Now, as far as these disturbances, let me show you something on the water vapor satellite picture. As you can see in the water vapor satellite picture, there are several disturbances from the Ohio Valley all the way back into the northern plains. Now, each one of these disturbances is highlighted by blue and green colors. What that basically means is moisture is being lifted in these locations, and each one of these disturbances are basically rotating from the northern plains off the mid-Atlantic coast. Now, there is a slight concern for a bit of more of a moderate snowfall along the immediate coast. And what I mean by immediate coast, I mean southern Connecticut, Long Island, New York City Metro, down through the Jersey Shore. The threat here is that sometimes these disturbances hit the Atlantic Ocean and they intensify rapidly, almost without notice. And they're handled very poorly on model guidance. At least within 6 hours, you could still have a forecast of scattered snow showers, and this disturbance hits the coast, and boom, you get moderate snow. They're very difficult to forecast, and they create a lot of volatility. Saying that, I will keep an eye on these disturbances throughout the weekend. For now, I'm only expecting light snow, 1 to 2, maybe 2 to 3 inches at most. However, if one of these disturbances does start to slow down, you start to see a lot of lifting or a lot of blues and greens on the satellite picture starting to develop over New Jersey, then something is up and the model guidance is missing it. So, of course, I'll be keeping an eye on this threat on Twitter and on nynjpaweather.com. And, of course, those who have signed up for regional alerts will be notified as quickly as possible. So that's one aspect we're going to keep an eye on this weekend. Otherwise, look for generally cloudy skies this weekend with temperatures averaging slightly below normal in the upper 20s to lower 30s. Yes, this snow is not going anywhere, and there's more on the way. I'll get to that in just a moment. Before going any further, I just want to show you the surface map for this morning as at 8 a.m. on Friday. And you can see all these disturbances going back from just off the North Carolina coast all the way back into the central plains of Canada. And you can see Arctic high pressure sitting up over Ontario and bleeding into Quebec. So clearly the cold conditions will continue along with the scattered snow showers. But notice that for the most part, these disturbances are weakening as they move towards the East Coast. Again, we'll have to keep an eye on these disturbances once they hit the Atlantic Ocean, but for the most part, most of these disturbances will be weak and fast moving. Now, how about later on next week? Now that is an interesting scenario setting up. This is the European model guidance from the Penn State EWOL for Wednesday night. Now, there are several features on this model guidance that I have to strongly question. And I know that there are many who are just going to say, hey, look, there's the models, we're going to change over to rain. It's not going to be that easy of a forecast. I strongly suggest keeping an eye on this storm. What we have here is a pattern that clearly produces several disturbances from the southwest all the way through to the mid-Atlantic coast. And what that means is that the model guidance is not going to be able to handle these disturbances very well. I don't think that this is going to be one organized low pressure system, at least not initially, but instead several waves of low pressure beginning Tuesday evening on through Thursday, with one major low pressure system possible as everything starts to organize. But when you're looking at the model guidance, you have to understand what is reasonable, what isn't. Notice on the European model guidance here, we have a questionable phase over the Great Lakes that pulls this low pressure system further north. But look how the lifting, that's the red, is elongated and pulled apart. that usually means that there's a lot of error in the model guidance on exactly how these disturbances are going to be handled. Further, note where the polar vortex is basically over Quebec, and that produces a suppression of the pattern typically, and there's encircled in yellow usually convergence and confluence, which is another warning sign that high pressure is likely going to be over New England rather than off of the New England coast. Further, with these disturbances hitting the East Coast this weekend, the model guidance may be underdoing the influence of a potential upper level low, or at least a stronger trough off the Canadian Maritimes, which also enhances convergence and confluence aloft over New England and thus surface high pressure. The point is that this setup would support a significant snowfall or potentially some significant ice middle of this week from Tuesday on through Thursday. This is not the typical storms that we've been seeing where we get a nor'easter and it explodes. This is more of a long duration type of event, what's called isotropic lifting, which is basically warm air trying to move over cold air. And low level Arctic air is typically under forecasted by the model guidance. If you don't believe me, just check the last storm that we just dealt with, which basically gave much of New Jersey a driving rainstorm about this same time period out from the storm from yesterday. So clearly we're going to have to keep an eye on this storm for the middle of next week. It could be a major snow producer. I'll discuss this even more in the premium discussions for the severe winter weather discussions for this morning. There's clearly something up with this setup that I think we need to be very aware of and keep an eye on. Thank you for trusting in NYNJPA Weather as your weather source for the Northern Mid-Atlantic. Have an excellent weekend. Stay safe out there and drive a little slower. It's a little slippery out there.